Hello, I'm Henry Mack, and welcome to a special edition of Viewpoint. The college experience comes at a time when young people begin to form ideas and opinions about themselves and others that last a lifetime. But the college experience isn't the same for all students. And some studies have shown that young black men are often among the most stereotyped populations in higher education and society. A 2015 University of Pennsylvania study by Dr. Sean Harper reinforces that this falsehood exists, mainly due to outdated statistics that, quote, only continue to perpetuate stereotypes against young black men, end quote. His findings show that these undergraduate men were frequently confronted with stereotypes, but succeed in resisting them through campus leadership roles and engaging in student organizations. And artist E.G. Brown created the Mugshot series to highlight these stereotypes of black men. Part of his Perception of Complexion campaign, Brown uses these powerful images to respond to the bigotry that minorities and people of color face in our society. In a Huffington Post interview, Brown said, quote, "We're not condoning violence or gang activity or criminality. We're just bringing to light these negative perceptions and how we feel about them. I'm about spreading peace and love," he continues, "and understanding," end quote. With that in mind, we welcome today's panel. Rashad Perry Patterson, Vice President of the Black Student Union at Florida International University. He's majoring in political science and is in the pre-law program. Devin Plaskett, a senior at Barry University, majoring in biology. James Lewis, a senior at Miami-Dade College, finishing his bachelor's degree in business management. James served as a Student Government Association president from January 2015 through July 2016. Malcolm J. Simon, a senior at Florida International University with a double major in finance and economics. Malcolm has been the Black Student Union treasurer at FIU for 2 years. And Javarius Gilmore, graduate student, majoring in corporate communications and public relations at Barry University. And Dario Felipe, entrepreneur and motivational speaker and founder of Generation Today, Inc. Dario is the host of the Waiting on Superheroes podcast, as well as a Palm Beach Atlantic University School of Ministry graduate. Gents, thanks for taking the time on this pressing and important topic. As I alluded to at the outset, there is, I would argue, an unfair bias or stereotype that is associated with you that perhaps arguably inherently makes you more at a disadvantage to succeed in college. And so that's the point of today's program, is to just sort of pick apart that assumption. Dario, let me start with you. One of the major stereotypes is that there are more black men in prison than there are in colleges, which we know is a myth, but I'm wondering what your analysis is of that myth itself and why it continues.
Okay, speaking about outdated statistics, there's a filmmaker who goes by the name of Janks Morton, and he did this research in 2012 with the Department of Education, and it said that there's 1.4 million black men that are enrolled in colleges. Now, these aren't just like little schools. These are like 2 to 4 year universities. And then he looked at the Department of Justice, and this is in 2012 still. 1.4 million black men are enrolled in school. In the Department of Justice, he looked into the statistics and he realized that there's only 794,000 black men in jail. So that means that we have a higher probability as black men to go to college than to go to jail. So the question is, who's writing the narrative? Right. And why are we believing it? I'm a firm believer that everybody in this room, everyone here right now, is a product of what someone said, what we heard, or what we believe ultimately. And I just think it's very dangerous. I taught at alternative school in Broward County under the leadership of Belinda Hope as the principal. And there's something that they always taught us about children, is to be careful what you say around them. If Tommy is throwing things, if he's spitting, if he's cutting, if he's hitting the other kids, don't call him bad. Use other words. Don't call him naughty. Don't call him stupid. Use other words to redirect that. And I thought to myself, if we have to be careful to speak a certain way we speak to children, shouldn't we be even more careful with what we listen to and what narratives we take? So, I question where these narratives come from.
Sure.
And I think we should be rewriting them ourselves.
Jens, what do you think about the existing narrative that we began the show here with? What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? What are your experiences, really? Javaris.
I think myths are powerful things because once you believe in a myth, or once someone picks up a narrative, it's really hard to change it. And I think a better question would be, why do we need that myth? Why do we need the myth that black people are, overcrowded in the jails and things of that nature? Because, that would reflect the society that we're in, that we need this myth to keep our society going instead of including the black community as our society claims it does, which sort of relates to my experiences, sort of my frustrations in high school, undergrad, and currently in grad school now, is that, people have been, selling me this myth that, you're included. There's nothing holding you back. But, just 24 hours in a day, I'm reminded constantly that, yes, I'm being held back.
There are inherent barriers, as I alluded to at the outset, inherent stereotypes or unjustified stereotypes that may impede your academic progress and success. So before we get to the frustrations that you experience on a daily basis, just wondering again, other thoughts on this myth?
Dario made a good point about the labels, and that's something that we underestimate how powerful it is. So as a child, even until now, when you constantly hear a certain type of label, especially when it's negative, and that feeds into the stereotype, we begin to believe it ourselves. So then that hurts the confidence, and it hurts the growth, and it hinders the potential that we have. So when you do call a child stupid, or you do call a child bad, or you do say he's not gonna make it in life, he begins to believe it himself. So therefore, it's like it questions his potential as far as how he's gonna go. So then he goes through life believing what he's been told. And then as you get to college, if you haven't broken certain stereotypes yourself or mental barriers yourself, by the time you get to college, it's become manifested in your daily life. And so it's gonna be even harder to get rid of that. So while you're in college and you're trying to make it out, and you're trying to succeed, and you're trying to push yourself, there's other mental barriers before you get to societal barriers that you have to face yourself because of previous and past instances that you've had a label on you since you were 4 or 5 years old.
Mm-hmm. Also, to add on that, one of the things that I believe, your mind is very powerful, more than anything, because it takes the mind to create everything we have in this world. So if you attack the mind, you get the person. So if you have me believe I will never make it in life, I won't make it. So since you are a kid, even with my little brother, with my nephew, my nieces, that's what I do. Since they are kids, I teach them that the mind is very powerful. So when somebody comes to me personally, and tell me something, I don't deny it, I don't accept it. That's why we have the web research for. You go on, just as this person did, you go and do the research and find out the truth for yourself. So I strongly believe also all these statistics, all this analysis to distract us, to make us believe that, listen, look at all these people who've tried before. Look at all these 50, 60 years old black men who end up in jail, who had something going on for their lives. They have you believe that they attack your brain to shut you down, and you feed into whatever they're trying to feed you, and you become another statistic. So in college, my mother always tell me, you want something, go get it. Right. Just don't put yourself in the position to be stopped. So go to school, do your homework, study, do the simple things, and you will achieve your bachelor's degree, your master's degree, or whatever it is. So a lot of black men in jail, nah, I don't believe that. Also, it's the research again, analyze, do for yourself, the Department of Justice. Yeah. And I also believe outdated, false. I strongly believe these things. Yeah. So go to every single college, universities, institutional, vocational school. Do a true statistic for everybody count.
Right. Malcolm, how do you see it?
Well, I feel like it's that myth is based off things we see off media, right? So, for example, we often seen during a prison show that the majority of the population is like African American or black. And I feel like it's a lazy narrative that that is used to, not for underlying meaning, it's just easy to say. And I feel like it's lazy. I feel like that's the biggest issue we see. And because of that lazy narrative, we develop stereotypes that affects the black community as a whole in society.
Maybe let's pivot a bit away from this myth that there are more black men in prisons than there are in colleges, which is clearly not true. But maybe we can revisit your point. Why is this being perpetuated? Or maybe how it's manifested in college and in your experiences at the university, and whether or not there are still existing implicit and inherent biases among faculty even that impede or frustrate your ability to succeed, and why this is true, if it is true. Devin, I was just wondering maybe your thoughts too.
Well, for my college experience, I really didn't face that many issues or problems. It was more or less in my earlier education years as elementary and high school, because I went to a private elementary school. I was the only African-American kid in my class, and from there, high school, I went to a predominantly white high school, and they looked at me as, oh, well, how come you don't speak, you know, the way they see it on TV, or because I talk like how they do. Oh, yeah, like, oh, you don't speak like a regular African-American. And to my head, it's like, what does a regular African-American speak or sound like? I am me, this is who I am, this is how I talk. Just because I'm not what you see on TV or what you see in music videos or what you see on other shows, that doesn't mean that that's who I am, so.
And then in addition to what he was saying is, when you step into the classroom, to answer your question, it's already a preconceived notion of how we're going to behave in the classroom. And there's already a mental barrier as far as our intelligence. So I said it to say, when you walk into the classroom, it's sometimes you might not be the first that they choose when you're doing group work, or they might not feel comfortable until they realize, I can articulate, I can handle my work, I can take care of business in the classroom, and I can still study, and sometimes even better yet, outperform my classmates. It's not until then that they realize, okay, now I've prejudged him before I've even begin to speak to him or allow him to show himself who he is. So a lot of times on college campuses, we have to outwork. We have to go that extra mile. At this point, it's not negotiable, because it's to take away the excuses, and it's also to deal with what we are going through in college and the barriers that we have to face. So everything that we do, we have to be the best at what we do, and we have to make sure that we always go the extra mile, because sometimes people, I've even experienced in earlier years, in the first couple years of college, some people weren't quite naturally working, didn't really feel comfortable working with me until they realized that, you know what, he is on top of his work, and he does feel focused about his class. So that's a lot of things that we have to deal with as far as college is concerned, and making sure that we limit the excuses ourselves, because we add on to what we're already going through as far as societal barriers.
How unfortunate that is that you encounter that, you know, in this day and age. Malcolm.
And to his point, there are often times where you're, like, I'll be the only black student in the class, and after you put in all that work, they question your blackness. Like, oh, you're not really black because you can put in so much work, or you can put in so much effort. It's more from the student.
Is that like implicit, or is that actually explicit at times?
It depends on the person. It depends on, like, you'll have, you'll be surprised that you can hold your own in presentation, or you can hold your own, or you breaking the curve during the exam, or things like that. But that's the thing I noticed. Is from more so the students, not so much the professors, in my opinion. Right. The students are surprised, which is weird, because I came from I went to a black high school essentially, so going to a university mostly Hispanic, it was surprising to see that, honestly.
It's really interesting, because the load that black men carry, especially those of us who are educated black men in academia, the load and the stress that we face is unbearable, because it's ingrained in us as children. All of us will say this, I'll start it off and you guys finish it, right? Our parents, our moms, dads, our family will always tell us, you have to work twice as hard than they do,
Right.
whether it's true or not. Like, we're raised with this idea that when we get into the work market, when we get into school, when we get into academia, we have to work twice as hard. And it's really a tough load to carry, because I've seen both sides of it. I've seen professors who were kind of indifferent towards the black students in the classroom, especially when it comes to the theology background, depending on how it is sometimes. And I've also seen professors who expected the most from us, who were white Caucasian professors, and they saw black men in the classroom and they applauded that. But it's a heavy load for us to carry. It's extremely heavy, and the thing is that we'll be walking through life, working twice as hard, fighting our way through things, going through certain stresses that nobody can understand, no one can see. But it's something that's so ingrained within our culture, within our minds. It's systemic as well, but it's interesting.
Well, I mean, I think I know why it manifests because, our community's essentially been in rebellion since we got here. So when a community complains about certain things, it's better to blame the community, Oh, well, you guys are lazy. Oh, well, look at the dropout rate. Oh, look at this, X, Y, and Z. But, you need both. Like, there's a reason that certain high schools have high dropout rates. Where is that high school located? Society doesn't suspend itself because you're 6 hours in the building. Like, when I went to high school and middle school, I had to walk from a, quote, safe neighborhood to the ghetto to go to school, to get educated. And I was wondering why my mom wanted me to take the bus because, I would see things that I wasn't around in my own neighborhood that, that I had to encounter walking to school, drug dealers, gang territory. It's a different society that people have to navigate. It's almost like a schizophrenic experience. Like, you have to be separate people at different times. And I had to navigate that as a 13-year-old all the way till when I was 18. And then, when you get to college, it's really weird because you sort of learn some of the myths for what they really are, just as myths that you've been lied to. And as James Baldwin once said, to be black and relatively conscious, to be in a state of rage almost all the time.
Right.
Because you see what the society is doing to you, and when you speak out, people want to talk about, all these misnomers, black and black crime, this and that, and you get frustrated because you have to ask yourself, do you really care and do you really want change? And, as far as my experience, most people, it's like, when people say we want peace on earth, but we're, marching to wars.
Right. Many of those on the right would argue or would try to make the claim that we've entered a post-racial society and that these encounters and that these struggles really are of something of the past. Now, this is an argument that's out there. I'm not saying it's legitimate, but we are confronted with this narrative too. And many are frustrated that we are in an era where we are hyper-racially conscious and that this is still the case even after electing the first African-American black president. And there are, again, those on the right that would want to argue that we should be beyond this by now. We should not be having this conversation. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that. Rashad, yeah, it looks like you're about to jump out of your seat.
It's like because being the vice president of the Black Student, my first question would be, where have you been in TV for just the past 2-3 weeks? Yeah. If you're saying we're beyond that, then why are African American males, why are African American women still being killed unjustifiably? And then for the argument for black on black crime, for our organization, our council, we actually did our own research on that. And then we'll be discussing later on in the year as far as to our membership, is that a myth or is that something of the past? And it's something that it's frustrating because the more you try to educate your members and the more you try to advocate on behalf of what's going on, the more society wants to deny and want to dilute what's going on. And it's a part of that patriarchal system that we're dealing with that, oh, it's just black on black crime, you all do the same thing.
Right.
For someone, for a man to be pinned down on the ground and have no way of getting up, no way to even reach for a weapon, and to be able to be shot in the back, there's no understanding of why that's your view on that. And if you do feel that way, why don't you go talk to the parents of, Eric Gardner or Trayvon Martin or Sandra Bland's mom. Go talk to these parents, really understand, and go tell them that's really how you feel. Because we're seeing it every day. We've been seeing it just this summer alone, how many African American males have been killed due to the situations that were going on, due to the system that we have. And, and I allude to the reference to President Barack Obama, they're saying that even with our president, we have an athlete who's kneeling, the controversial topic of the national anthem.
Yes.
But yet we have a president who stands and have his hands over his heart and he still gets criticized because of his race. They still question his blackness and they still question where he was from. So it's like, our question would be so where do we go from here? We're darned if we do, we're darned if we don't. So where is it? Our question to you is, okay, how would you answer that? What do we do? We stand and we kneel and we still get criticized. We educate, whether we educate and try to succeed, we still have to outwork everyone and we still get criticized. So what is it that you want us to do?
We also have to understand that we're not too far removed from slavery. we'll ask ourselves, when did slavery end? We'll say, yes, several hundred years, but when we consider Jim Crow, we're only like, what, 60 to 80 years out of this? I mean, the harsh reality of this is the fact that just a few days ago, we had a woman at the African American Museum that opened. Her mother, right? Was it her mother? Her grandmother was a slave.
Right.
That's how close it is. Like, some of us can touch someone right now who knew someone who was in slavery. We're not that far removed. So we have to understand that this is still fresh. We have not dealt with the issue of slavery. We have not dealt with the issues of the civil rights movement. We haven't dealt with the issues of police brutality within this country. And I think that President Obama is a very interesting figure, because on one side it says that, yes, we have progressed to a certain degree in America, but at the same time, it's just an illusion. Just because this man has a seat doesn't mean that things are good whatsoever. In fact, we can watch President Obama and watch his nuances and watch his temperament and his character, and we can see how he's still uncomfortable with certain things. There are certain topics and issues that he really can't address. He hasn't addressed, and we can understand that because the system itself has still not dealt with that. So my biggest problem is the fact that, yeah, we hear these things as to, yeah, let's just kind of brush this under the table. Yeah, slavery's over, racism is over, we're living in a different time. I mean, look at you guys, you're in school, right? I mean, look at you guys, you have great jobs, right? You have lawyers and doctors, so it's over. But the illusion of that is the fact that it's still fresh. But yet, you would never walk up to someone who experienced what they experienced with the Nazi regime and tell them to forget it. You would never walk into a synagogue and say, hey, that Adolf Hitler, that was ages ago, get over it. You wouldn't dare say that.
Or give a pro-Castro argument. Great healthcare, great music, great food. Like, no, that you realize how insensitive that is the moment it leaves your mouth. And it just goes back to what I said, that's just a myth that people need for some reason, and they don't want to investigate why they need it. Our country has never dealt with its history. People who believe in this post-racial society, which I would love to live in. I would love to. I would, if I can find it, search for another country. But it's like, after we got the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, which we already have, which is the 15th Amendment, things still weren't cool. Like, we didn't just mesh as a society. Like, you have centuries of ingrained, you basically kept a community excluded from your country for centuries. Yeah. And then decades after that. So this post-racial myth that we believe in is really damaging because you're not confronting anything.
Yeah. What can we do, or what can you do, or what do you see, even Dario or even yourselves, as your responsibility in particular to either upend this false narrative or even to correct the ill that is, at least within higher ed, since you're still in there. What do you see your responsibility being exactly? James, or Devin, go ahead. James and then Devin, or Devin then James, sorry.
Doesn't matter. Sometimes I feel like it has a lot to do with ignorance, because some people believe, okay, slavery is over, so everything that had to deal with that must be over as well. And being a former president of Black Student Union at Barry University, our goal was to educate the people in the community at Barry of what's going on, what's still happening today, by things that are happening on the news, what's happening in the media, and things that are going on TV that some people may not know about. And it's just more or less getting everyone to be educated on certain topics that, hey, even though that's over, that time is done, we're still dealing with this today based upon those who still have that mindset. And there's no way to kind of get out of that unless we're able to change people's mindset and change their ignorance and educate them on how we want to move forward from everything.
It's a hard thing to do. James, speaking of the mind, right?
One of my favorite singers, Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. So one thing that I usually do with my friends is ask them the question, what is slavery? Okay. Years back, 70 years or 80 years ago, we had people who were into forced labor, in chains, or even in the pictures that I see, when they chained the black men around the tree and around the neck. So if you put somebody right here in the middle and you tell them, do this, do that, if they have a choice, they will decide for themselves if it will benefit them or not. But slavery is when you force people, when you take away their choices. So when you chain somebody to cultivate your land, to clean your houses at no cost, that's slavery. But in this time, I believe mental slavery nowadays. So the media, for example, I think the media's job is to infiltrate our brain and to put us into slavery mentally. Literally, I believe that strongly. So around my house or around my community, I always tell people, watch the news less and do more research or read more books. I had a student.
And that's the case for everything, not just race, but
Yes.
also political issues, et
Everything,
cetera.
yeah.
We have about 30 seconds left. I wanted to get a closing thought from you, Dario.
Closing thought for me is the fact that let's deal with the solutions. We already know that the issues are there. We understand that. We see the fruits, and it's bitter. And I just want to deal with the solutions, and I believe the solutions are right in this room.
Yes.
It is said that it only takes 5% of role models in a community for the whole city and the community to change. That means that if there's 100 people, just five men and women who are dedicated to success, who are models, who exude success and academic excellence, will change a community. And the final thing I just want to say is just the fact that at the end of the day, we are the creators and designers of our lives, not the media, not stereotypes,
that.
even if it's true. Like, we may come from broken backgrounds and communities, but at the end of the day, we have to make a choice. I want to do better. I want to be somebody, and it's in our hands at the end of the day. So.
Thank you all for taking the time. I want to continue this online and on social media too. This is not the end of our conversation, but thanks for, again, making time this morning. I'm Henry Mack. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
End quote. With that in mind, we welcome today's panel. Rashad Perry Patterson, Vice President of the Black Student Union at Florida International University. He's majoring in political science and is in the pre-law program. Devin Plaskett, a senior at Barry University, majoring in biology. James Lewis, a senior at Miami-Dade College, finishing his bachelor's degree in business management. James served as a Student Government Association president from January 2015 through July 2016. Malcolm J. Simon, a senior at Florida International University with a double major in finance and economics. Malcolm has been the Black Student Union treasurer at FIU for 2 years. And Javarius Gilmore, graduate student, majoring in corporate communications and public relations. Hello, I'm Henry Mack, and welcome to a special edition of Viewpoint. The college experience comes at a time when young people begin to form ideas and opinions about themselves and others that last a lifetime. But the college experience isn't the same for all students. And some studies have shown that young black men are often among the most stereotyped populations in higher education and society. A 2015 University of Pennsylvania study by Dr. Sean Harper reinforces that this falsehood exists, mainly due to outdated statistics that, quote, only continue to perpetuate stereotypes against at Barry University. And Dario Felipe, entrepreneur and motivational speaker and founder of Generation Today, Inc. Dario is the host of the Waiting on Superheroes podcast, as well as a Palm Beach Atlantic University School of Ministry graduate. Gents, thanks for taking the time on this pressing and important topic. As I alluded to at the outset, there is, I would argue, an unfair bias or stereotype that is associated with you that perhaps arguably inherently makes you more at a disadvantage to succeed in college. And so that's the point of today's program, is to just sort of pick apart that assumption. Dario, let me start with you. One of the major stereotypes is that there are more black men in prison than there are young black men, end quote. His findings show that these undergraduate men were frequently confronted with stereotypes, but succeed in resisting them through campus leadership roles and engaging in student organizations. And artist E.G. Brown created the Mugshot series to highlight these stereotypes of black men. Part of his Perception of Complexion campaign, Brown uses these powerful images to respond to the bigotry that minorities and people of color face in our society. In a Huffington Post interview, Brown said, quote, "We're not condoning violence or gang activity or criminality. We're just bringing to light these negative perceptions and how we feel about them." I'm about spreading peace and love, he continues, and understanding in colleges, which we know is a myth, but I'm wondering what your analysis is of that myth itself and why it continues.
Okay, speaking about outdated statistics, there's a filmmaker who goes by the name of Janks Morton, and he did this research in 2012 with the Department of Education, and it said that there's 1.4 million black men that are enrolled in colleges. Now, these aren't just like little schools. These are like 2- to 4-year universities. And then he looked at the Department of Justice, and this is in 2012 still. 1.4 million black men are enrolled in school. And the Department of Justice, he looked into the statistics and he realized that there's only 794,000 black men in jail. So that means that we have a higher probability as black men to go to college